Welcome back to ZANTASTIC. Today, I am truly honored to have our guest, Dr. Robin Hall, with us. Dr. Hall is a board certified family physician with over 30 years of experience, and she's been a trailblazing concierge medical pioneer. She's a sought after keynote speaker and the author of the inspiring book, The Other Side of Illness, Unexpected Blessings. But what makes her story so unique is that she has lived on all sides of medical events. She has been the doctor, she's been the patient, and she's been the care provider. So this story is truly unique. Of course, I am a caregiver to my husband, Mark, so I'm pretty vulnerable in this conversation. I ask about a lot of the experience I've had as a caregiver, how we can be better caregivers, what it's like being a patient when a caregiver is providing to you so that you can just get insights. I got so much out of this interview. And if you are a caregiver or know someone whose family member is going through any kind of medical event, this is an insightful interview. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. And I am so grateful that Dr. Hall took some time out of her schedule to talk with me because it was helpful. It almost felt like a coaching session for caregivers just because she gave me so much personal guidance. And I know that that's going to apply to you too. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. Dr. Robin Hall, thank you so much for being here with me today. I am so excited to talk to you for a lot of reasons that'll become clear as we begin talking, I am sure. For our audience, just give us an idea of who you are and your expertise.
Okay, well, thank you, Kathy. I'm excited to be here with you. I am a board certified family physician, a keynote speaker, and an author. And what I do is help women and really anyone that is navigating life's hardest seasons to help them reclaim their health, their confidence, their voice. And I teach audiences how to take charge not only of their physical health, but their mental and spiritual well being. And I also work to help people change adversity and look at adversity and change it into strength and purpose. So I play a lot of different roles, and I'm just very passionate about helping people thrive because I've thrived myself, not only in founding a trailblazing concierge medical practice, but also navigating cancer, both from a caregiver standpoint, caregiving for my husband who had stage 4 cancer, and from being a cancer survivor myself. And that's what inspired my book, The Other Side of Illness, Unexpected Blessings. So that's kind of it in a nutshell of where I am today. I've had a circuitous route to get to being a doctor and a speaker and an author, but that's where I am right now.
Wow. So how long ago was it when you had all of the cancer experiences?
Well, it was almost 10 years ago that my husband was diagnosed. I was very busy in my concierge medical practice, a solopreneur. And one more, things were going great. I had a thriving medical practice and loving family. By all accounts, everything was perfect. And as you know, and many of people in the audience know, life can change in a second. And one morning we were getting ready for church, and my husband said, "Would you come feel this lump in my neck?" And the minute I felt it, I knew that we were in trouble. And sure enough, it was stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is cancer throughout the whole lymphatic system. And stage 4 means that it was already in the bone marrow. And then just a few short years later, I got out of the shower one morning and noticed that one breast looked different than the other. And even though I had had a mammogram for months prior, based on my medical experience and expertise, I knew that still needed to go get it rechecked, get checked again. And the mammogram was normal, but the ultrasound showed the mass, and indeed it was breast cancer. And so I am about four, not quite 4.5 years out from that. And my husband is going on 10 years. He has beat all the odds. He is truly a miracle. So I tell people I've been on all sides of the stethoscope, from doctor with over 30 years of medical training, taking care of thousands of patients, and being a caregiver for my husband, and being a cancer survivor myself. So I feel like I have a unique perspective on helping other people
Yeah.
deal with life's most challenging seasons.
Yeah, for sure. What a story. And I was waiting for that. Like, how's your husband? It's like, I didn't want to come out and ask it, but I am so happy to hear that he survived all of that, because I know stage 4 is just frightening. For people who are listening, when they are faced with something that's funky, and then they go through the diagnosis, it can be a huge shock to their system. What advice can you give people who are going through that kind of experience?
Well, the first thing everyone faces is fear. Even as a physician, I was humbled by my own experience. And even though I had the knowledge base that, yes, this was probably caught early, I'm probably going to be okay, the first thing you think of is, am I going to die? Now, not all illnesses and not all diagnoses are life threatening, but many of them are potentially life altering. Your whole life can change. So the first thing I tell people is take a deep breath. That's the first thing you need to do. And don't go jump on the internet, because so many people do that. And there's a lot of information on the internet that is not accurate, first of all. And the other thing is, it's more anxiety producing. That doesn't mean you don't want to be educated about your diagnosis, but the main thing is to try to find, through your own primary care physician, let them refer you to the type of specialist that you need to see. And then you want to make sure that you don't be shy about asking questions, about advocating for yourself. And if you don't feel comfortable with the specialist, you go see another one. And don't worry about hurting anybody's feelings. This is your life. And as a physician who knows what it's supposed to be about, I will tell you, there was a lot of very disappointing situations that we had, and we changed doctors. And I'm so thankful that we did, because if we hadn't, I'm not sure that he would still be alive. He came close to dying on about 3 different occasions. Sorry, I get choked up just talking about that a little bit, but I am just so happy to report he's still with us, and he's thriving. Now, he is dealing with some health issues right now, but thank God it's not cancer, as they say in Texas. It's not our first rodeo, so we're
Right.
dealing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's, having gone through the similar situation with my husband and being just like thrust into doctors and nurses and social workers and just specialists, all of this stuff. It's overwhelming, all of the information that you have to take in, and there's a temptation to just want to trust what's being told to you and just go with the recommendations, and I didn't. So I was very suspicious of everything, and I was researching online and asking questions and doing all of that, but I think there's a temptation. I've known a number of people who are just like, "Well, I'm just doing what the doctor says." What tells you that, I might be just different because I need to know everything before I'm going to make decisions, but a lot of people are just like, "Well, they're the doctor, I don't know," and they just turn over control of their healthcare to someone else who might not have the same investment as you or your family member that you're advocating for. What advice do you have?
I would say be like Kathy's aunt. That's what for an advocate, because, I don't want to diss anybody. I mean, this was my profession, medical profession.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I found that the empathy and compassion weren't always there. And unless that physician or healthcare provider has been through something themselves, they tend to get a very narrow focus on just, okay, this is the treatment and here's what it is. And some of them actually get upset if you are asking questions because it's an ego thing. I'm the doctor, whatever. So I think that it's important to ask questions, listen to your gut feeling. If it doesn't feel right, mindset is so important when it comes to any of these challenges. If you walk away and you don't feel the love, so to speak, or you don't feel comfortable with that person that they're looking at for your best interest, then you should listen to that intuition. And that's what we did in both of our situations. And I've had other situations as well, because you only have one chance at this life. And, we're not a car. You can't trade it in and get a new one. But I think that there's ways to do it that doesn't put the physician on defensive. If you come in and say, yeah, and I never liked this as a doctor either. Well, the internet said such and such, such, such. That's not the way you want to approach it. You want to approach it and say, well, I'm not really feeling comfortable with this solution. Do I have other options? That's a good way to approach it. Or I read that this might be a treatment. What are your thoughts on that? You see the difference? And
Yes.
so if you talk that way, like, tell me your thoughts on this, or what other options I have, or if it was your mother or your sister or your husband, how would you go about it? Because that brings it back down to the personal level and gets the physician out of their head, because as physicians, we're trained to solve problems. So we immediately go into fixing it. Here's the problem, here's the solution. And in your busy daily practice, seeing many, many patients a day, sometimes it's really difficult to stop and say, hey, there's a person behind this diagnosis. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, completely. And I've noticed that there's some doctors who are like, and in dealing with my husband, I came across a couple of people who were just like very, very present to me as an advocate, as a caregiver, and to him as a human patient, right? But then there were others that just like were almost like blindly just following guidelines and blindly following this is the way we do it. And that I very good at identifying patterns. And so I could see this and intuit it very, very quickly. But do you think that there's an issue in medicine today where more and more doctors are just like, well, this is the way, these are the guidelines, this is what they say to do, and rather than exploring a condition with, because each patient is different, right?
Right. Well, what you said was exactly what I was talking about. I don't think that we can globalize it because every doctor is different. And so you're going to find doctors that are very empathetic, that are very compassionate, that will look at you as a person. But unfortunately, there are the others, just like you said, where it's their way or the highway, and they can be excellent physicians and their expertise and their recommendations are excellent. But again, you have to feel comfortable with it. You have to feel seen. And unless you're feeling seen and heard, you won't have a positive mindset about your future. And the whole thing is being able to feel positive that this person's really seeing me. They understand. They've given me all the options. They're thinking about where we are in life and what might work the best for us. And that's what we had to do. I originally sent my husband to a physician that I had referred to for years. But unfortunately, it was a total different situation than what I'd seen in the past. And he said, I'm not comfortable. So we drove 5 hours away, even though we have wonderful medical care here, night and day difference. night
Really?
and day difference. They treated me like a VIP. They took care of helping me navigate being a caregiver. And here I was, a physician. I was running a busy practice. We had a daughter at home. So they kept that in the equation at the same time they were taking care of him. And I just can't tell you how appreciative I am of that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had a few situations like that. He was in, hospital, nursing home, rehab center, hospital again, hospital again, because he got COVID in the rehab center, so I
Oh, no.
saw yeah, I know, and it was like, "Okay, he's gonna get better," and then, "Oh, we can't take him back because he got COVID," and it was 2021 when things were much more challenging, but I got to see a number of different facilities, a number of different care providers, and there were very different flavors of investment there, so I yeah, I don't think there's any just like, "Okay, well, this is what they say to do." I think it really you have to have that sense of, "No, this is right. This person has my back. This person is going above and beyond for what we need, not just following rules," because he had the stroke and because, he had COVID and everything was locked down, they weren't letting family members in, but one nurse was like, "He needs you, so we're gonna get you an exemption and let you in, but nobody else can come in, it's just you," just because he needed an advocate because he couldn't speak for himself, and he was so disoriented, so it was, loads of fun. I'm very curious how because it was a very trying time for me, and I'm sure as you were even though you had care providers that were very sensitive to everything you had going on, you still had to take care of you. How was that for you?
Well, that's where I failed. Or I'm going to tell on myself because I think that's one of the things that I do now is help empower people not to forget about themselves when they're the caregiver. As a physician, I was trained to always take care of everybody else. And I was very into prevention. And the truth is that I wasn't practicing my own medicine because I was putting everyone else first. And what I found through that journey is I actually lost myself. I became very depressed and very isolated. And when you're in the depths of all of that, like it's hard to see the forest for the trees because I tried to think positively, but I knew too much medically.
Yeah.
And so to be quite honest, I was worried I was going to be a widow at any time, and I was too young to do that. And here I have this practice that's thriving that I have to take care of. And how am I going to navigate all of these things? One of my friends said, "You're going to go out with us to our high school reunion." And I thought, well, that is the last thing I need to do. But that was the best thing that could have happened because I went and I had fun and I had an epiphany. You know what? I need to schedule fun in the midst of this. I need to put the oxygen mask on first. You hear that all the time, but you have to remember to do that. And I tell people that self care is not selfish, it's survival. And one of the things I started doing is that when he was resting, we had a little gym in the neighborhood that we lived in at the time. I would go over there and work out in the gym, and most of the time I was the only one in there. And I turned inspirational music up all the way. And I listened to the inspirational music. I sung with that. And I started asking and allowing help. And I went out and did things for myself when other people would come over because I've always been this overachiever, do everything myself. And it's hard to ask for help when you've always been in control, been the boss, been the one that calls the shots.
Yeah.
And so many people were wonderful. They would offer to bring food over, from my church and friends and neighbors. And so I started allowing that. And slowly but surely, got myself back. And so I think that one of the reasons that all of that happened was one of my purposes is to help encourage other people to not put themselves on the back burner. You can be compassionate and empathetic and be there for your loved one, but they need you all there. And if you're getting sick yourself, that's not going to help them at all.
Yeah, for sure. Similar situation where the immediate need was taking care of him, but this quiet whisper of a need was, you need to take care of yourself too, because
Exactly.
this requires more than you think. And it took a while for me to get there. I had this, I don't know if it was pride or what it was, but being superwoman, much like yourself, got work, I've got a daughter, I've got this house, of I can handle it. And just like almost this not wanting to rely on other people, not wanting to ask other people. And it it's ridiculous. I don't know what that was, but I think a lot of women, just because they do, they especially moms, you've got a little baby and you've got the house to take care of, and maybe you're working too. And so you have all of these needs and requirements that are draining from you. It it puts you, and then an event like this kind of thing happens, and you just kind of like, okay, well, I know this pattern. I've done it before. It's just a marathon. You just keep running, right? You just keep doing it, but you hit a wall eventually, don't you?
You do hit a wall. And, I think moms are all like that. Well, you put being a physician on top of that. When I went to medical school, I'm aging myself a little bit, but I was in the minority as a woman. And you feel like you're always having to prove your worth. And if you're asking for help, it feels like a sign of weakness. And I think that's what you're talking about too. You feel weak if you're having to ask for help. I've always been able to handle all of this, but none of us have navigated this journey until it happens. And I think caregiving is one of the hardest things in life. And people don't understand that until they're in that role. But, it's emotionally, physically, spiritually draining. And I think just having conversations like this are very useful, because if someone's not navigating something like this right now, it will happen. And if you hear, hey, I need to take care of myself, I need to allow people to help me. If one person is helped by us talking about this, then, I'm happy about that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What about the people, the well-meaning people? I'm sure you had a few of them who think they have some advice for you of what you should be doing. And they think they're helping. They think that that's the way to help. But sometimes that advice just, it just doesn't line up. How do you deal with those kinds of well-meaning people? Like their intention is good. They don't know how to help, so they give a lot of advice that isn't necessarily good advice.
That that is so true, and it happens all the time, and they are well-meaning. They knew somebody that had cancer and they did this. But what I would say to people in our situation is, because most people don't understand that every stroke is different, every cancer is different, and what works for one person is not going to work for someone else. And so people would tell us, well, my husband or my daughter or whatever had this treatment, it was great. And so I explained to them, well, thank you for that, but there are many different types of lymphoma, and the treatments are different for each one of them. And there are things based on one person's health history that might affect whether or not that treatment would work. And so usually that would kind of, push them back. But I've had a couple of friends. Unfortunately, I've been surrounded by cancer lately with friends, and it's just heart wrenching. And I continue to hear these things. Well, they need to do this or they need to do that, or why are they at that place? And it's very frustrating for me not to say something about that. But I know that they're just trying to help because they're hurting inside too. They don't want that friend or family member to pass on. They're trying to deal with their own emotion of, oh my gosh, this is really scary. And so I really try to think about where it's coming from rather than get angry that they are, saying some of these things. And that's not always easy. I could give several examples. I'm sure you can too. It's because you're tired and you're afraid and you're feeling vulnerable. And sometimes those comments, they don't realize how difficult it is to hear those. And I think that we just have to realize that they're trying to process the whole thing themselves.
Super good advice. Yeah, it's, 'cause that's the only way they know how
Right.
to help.
Right.
Um, Maybe giving people, like, an option of, I can tell you really, really wanna help. Here's something you can do to help, like, giving them a project of,
That's a great,
like
mhm.
like,
It's
I could
great advice.
really use a meal on Saturday because we're doing this treatment on Friday, and I know it's gonna be crazy, and maybe you can help with it, giving them a project or something, but it's that initial reaction of, "I just wanted to tell this person to shut up."
I love.
In a word, it's just like, "No, I don't wanna hear this," it's just like, "You wanna deal with it? You can come over and take care of this," It's, but, they're just well-meaning. I know this, but it's a struggle I think a lot of caregivers end up having to face where it's just, a lot of people ended up bringing him home against the advice of everyone, except for a few articles that I read that, someone at home in a familiar environment rather than an institution that takes away a lot of the other stressors so they can focus on the rehab more, and that made intuitive sense to me, but everybody else in my life, more concerned about me, wanted him in a nursing home or wanted him just away from me, away from so that I didn't have to do they wanted to care for me,
Right.
but that advice just didn't resonate with what I knew he needed and what I believed I was up for.
Well, I
Sometimes I'm like, "Why didn't I listen?" But I know what I did was right for him, so
well, I tell people you have to listen to your gut feeling on what you think is right at the time. And what's right at that time may change. And we have to be willing to pivot and be flexible because it may have been the right thing to do at the time to bring him home, but then a little bit later, that may need to change. And we don't have to stay with one decision. I think a lot of times we think if we make that decision, we've got to stay with that decision, but it's it's a changing environment all the time, and you may have to pivot and go a different way.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's an outpatient I'm, not far from you, I'm up in Denton, and Denton Medical City, Denton, which is where he went when he had the stroke originally, has an outpatient thing, and as soon as I get the Medicare stuff figured out, um, then I'm gonna try to get him, just still home at night, but sort of an outpatient type of thing. So, not completely averse to it, but yeah, it's good advice to stay flexible and stay with what you know is right and always future focused on positivity is
Mhm.
really good. So, I know when you're dealing with well, I know what I went through in dealing with hospitals and doctors, the ones I advocating, you have to advocate for someone who can't speak and is disoriented. I ended up a lot of times getting to what I would call just dialed up to 11, just, so many emotions running through and just hypervigilance and um it was really hard to just like kind of pull back from that kind of experience, and I know it couldn't be just me. You're in such a heightened state of awareness and attention that you get into these vigilant states. Can you talk to that a little bit?
I think that is very common. You're just going through so many different emotions. It's just overwhelming. And that's one of the things that I do is try to help people to dial it back. For me, what was helpful, I always liked to exercise, but the reality was I was exercising on the weekends because I worked long hours, during the week. But I really started becoming very intentional because what happens when you're in that season is you're very reactive. You're going through all the motions, you're trying to handle all the details, and it's important to stop long enough and set your intention for that day. And that's what I do now, which is very, very different than what I did in the past. Before, I was just going 90 miles an hour and putting this fire out and that fire out. And I will tell you, it is night and day difference. Now, what I do is each morning, and even if you only take 5 minutes, it's worth that 5 minutes. But I do a very short devotional or reading, and then I write a gratitude journal because when we are focusing on gratitude, and your gratitude may only be, I got up this morning, and I'm not sick, or
Yeah.
I got a good night's sleep last night. At least three things. And I write them down because I think that that's very important to do. And then I do my intention for the day. And your intention is not your to-do list because you'll be writing all day long if you're doing your to-do list. But today is going to go a lot better. It's going to be smooth and efficient. And that may sound very hokey to some people that have never done that. But I will tell you, it is so powerful when you set your intention to be able to work through whatever challenges come your way that day, to give yourself grace, to give grace to the people that you come in contact with. And sometimes the most difficult people that I had to deal with that day, I found that if I just said a quick little prayer for them
Mm.
before I interacted with them, it made the world of difference. But if you don't do anything except take a few deep breaths and set your intention for the day on how you want it to go, it is very powerful, and it will help you dial down that 11. Even if it dials it down to a 7 or 8, that's huge progress. But those little steps every day of focusing on intention and grace and gratitude make a huge difference, and it's so good for your own health and well-being.
Good advice for anyone. And it may seem, I think, when you're in the midst of it, superfluous or unnecessary because you've got to go do these things. I really think like taking those few moments can change everything.
It's huge. The days that I have to get up and get somewhere and don't get up early enough to do that, it's not the same day. It just isn't the same day. So I would highly recommend that, not only for people that are dealing with health challenges, but for everyone.
Yeah.
For everyone. There's so much anger and negativity in this world, and we need some positivity. So that has to come from within so that it will reflect outside of us. And so we have to work on ourselves first before we can deal with all of the frustrations that are around us. And there are a lot of that when you're dealing with healthcare situations.
For sure. Now, having been both a caregiver and a patient, what advice do you have from a patient perspective? Well, who took care of you? Who was your advocate? Who was your caregiver when you were going through your cancer situation? And like what worked there? What was helpful to you? What could have been better? Like what advice do you have from that perspective?
Well, I think because we had gone through all of this with my husband, that it was easier for me. I wasn't as frightened as I probably would have been had we not gone through that journey. Fortunately, I have some very good friends, some of which who've been through breast cancer. And so they were extremely supportive of me, brought food, even though my husband's a great cook. That's one of the things that people don't think about. Even if one of the partners in the situation is a good cook, they're still tired and they still need the help and the support too. So it was wonderful. They brought food. One of my friends who had already been through breast cancer, who's several years younger than I am, she'd already had mastectomy, chemo, all of that. She came and sat with me and she said 3 words that were the best things to hear. I need to tell her that. I'm not sure I've ever told her that, but she said, "You got this."
Mm.
Now that seems very simple, but at that moment, it was so profound just to hear, "You got this." And she would call or text me and say, "How are you doing today? Just remember you got this." And it sends goosebumps thinking about that, because a lot of times, if you're a strong person who has always handled everything for everybody else, and you're a physician too, people think, well, they've got it all together. They don't need anything. But it doesn't matter what my profession was. I'm still a human being behind all of that schooling and 30 years of experience. And so my caregiver was my husband, because by then he was doing much better, and my daughter, and then my friends and my church friends too. So I think it's just so important that people don't allow themselves to be isolated and let people help. And I did learn to say what it was I needed.
So in that experience, you kind of almost had to surrender to, I'm
Yes,
to be superwoman. I'm going to let people take care of me.
exactly. It was very humbling. It was very humbling. That's the best way to say it.
Yeah, I bet. I still have a hard time with that. Like letting people help me. I feel
It's not,
stronger now. Yeah, I mean, his health scare was kinda, and then I also woke up one morning and was like, "I should probably check my blood sugar." I had a sense that it was high, and it was, and I was like, "I guess scones are not a coping mechanism."
no, they're
They're
not.
not
They
the
taste
best
good,
thing.
but they're not.
Yeah, but that's what I was doing. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't don't even drink wine or anything, and coffee is not necessarily like a calming mechanism, but carbs were for me, and I had to change everything and start lifting weights and, like, just so his it I had to learn how to get stronger physically. I have to pick him up. He's not a small man. He's 6'2" and 200 and something pound. Well, I haven't put him on a scale in forever, but I have to pick him up and help him move around. And just I have to be strong. And but I still, even the strength that I feel now, I feel like I can handle anything. And I'm like almost like, don't tempt fate. Because I have still a hard time like allowing. I don't know if I could surrender at this point to somebody taking care of me. I don't know what that feels like. What
Well,
did it feel
one
like
of
to
the
you?
things to answer your question in where you are right now is there are some very good caregiver support groups online. I don't
Yeah.
know if you have gotten in touch with any of those, but I joined several of those groups online. Actually, more recently, since I wrote the book, I didn't even think about that, or was it recommended to me at the time. In fact, I was very disappointed in all the oncology people that we dealt with, except for the hospital we went to in Oklahoma. Did they ever talk about joining support groups? And that was really sad because they were taking care of the physical, but not the emotional or spiritual. And so I think that even though you may not have time to go somewhere to a support group, now with the Zoom and all the things that we have online, you can, go online to support groups, or they may not even be video, just reading the text. And sometimes reading the comments are a little bit depressing because people are spilling their guts. They're saying, I don't know if I can do this one more day. They're taking care of their loved ones or whatever, but that's their way to let out some of their emotions. But I also think that if you have the means, seeing a therapist, whether it's online or in person, is huge because you need that outlet. You've got to have someone to talk to. It's so therapeutic just to be able to vent. And, we don't want to be complaining to our friends all the time. And we don't feel like we want to be a burden to someone else. But if you can talk to someone that's a trained therapist or a psychologist, that's a huge help as well. And that was
Yeah.
one thing nice about the cancer center we went to in Oklahoma. They had that available not only for the patient, but for the caregiver.
Oh,
And that was
amazing.
huge. That was very, very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I did turn to my husband was a coach. He did neurolinguistic programming and was a coach for many years. And so he had his network of people who understood neuropsychology and everything, and they were helpful in understanding, what part of the brain was affected and everything. But there
Mhm.
was one guy, I'm like, I don't want to have to, I'm too stressed out. I don't want to have to explain us. Like, I need somebody who knows us to get
Right.
me through this. And so he's been helping me out. So I have done that. That is
That's
one
good.
way that I have gotten help and support, and almost just feels like my most trusted advisor about everything. So, yeah, so I guess I am getting help.
Well, you mentioned surrender is hard. If you read my book, I give you two little spoiler alerts. The first chapter, you'll see where surrendering was everything. And that was my infertility story.
Yeah.
Then there, you mentioned the whole COVID situation with your husband. One of the stories is about someone with COVID and the advocacy that she had to do. And I truly believe that if she had not advocated for herself like she did, she wouldn't be alive today.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of things in there that I think will speak to you, other people too. And I don't know if we said this, but the book is not all about my cancer story or my husband's cancer story. I talk about that in the beginning, but it's a compilation of stories of patients of mine. Some of them were friends of mine, some were referred to me from across the country, and they've had all different types of health challenges. We have things with heart and autoimmune diseases, and, organ transplants, cancers, all of that, but it is showing that through those people's journey that they found strength or courage or purpose or reconnected with people they've been estranged from or had epiphanies. There's all of these positive things that came from the journey. And sometimes we don't see those positive things until in hindsight.
For sure.
And, when I was going through our journeys, and we've had more than a couple, you're not sitting around looking for the bright side. You're just trying to get by every second, every minute, every hour, every day. But I wanted to write a book that gave people some inspiration, even if it was just for that minute. And what's nice about this is that you can just pick up and just read one story and then another time read another story. It's not a continuum. But I felt through our personal experience and through taking care of thousands of patients over 30 years, these struggles are universal. They're universal, and you just don't really hear people talk about it that much. But I wanted people to see that there can be growth from the hardest seasons in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's so awesome. I can't wait to get your book. I wish I had gotten it beforehand, but uh, yeah, I can't wait because And I love the way you structured it because a lot of times it's you don't need a whole book to change your mind. You just need one little insight and it just kind of you'll internalize that epiphany. You feel something from it and it can change everything. So, yeah, and for everybody that's listening or watching, there will be a link to that book in the show notes so that you can get it for yourself. I want to ask you one more question,
Sure.
which may be a little challenging, but I have a friend whose husband passed. She was a caregiver for he had a chronic illness and he passed. Do you have advice for people who are going through that either a hospice situation as a caregiver or even as a patient going through like that kind of when you realize that it's end stage and there's not much more that can be done, what advice do you have for those kinds of situations?
Well, the first part with the woman that lost her husband, I'm sorry to hear that. Um, Over the years of practice, I had some people who had lost their husband. And actually, a patient told me about a book called Widow to Widow. And so I have given that book out. It's a paperback book. It doesn't take long to read. But I've had a couple of patients come back to me and say that was the best thing for them. And they underlined it and wrote through it. And they said it felt like this author, and I apologize, I can't think of the author's name right this moment, but it felt like everything they were feeling and going through, and it was very helpful for them. And also, I think that people that are around them don't avoid mentioning that person's name. That person was part of their life for a long time. Mention memories that you have or fun times that you have because that's helpful for them. People that are dealing with the hospice situation and terminal illness, I don't know that I have the best advice. You probably want to ask a therapist or someone that has more, but unfortunately, we've dealt with that. My husband's brother was diagnosed with metastatic bladder cancer right before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, right around that time. And they told him he only had 3 months to live, and he actually survived about 2 months. That was very difficult to navigate. And I've had two other friends recently that, hospice and all of that. But what I've seen that I think is useful is to talk to the person that is dying if they are still mentally capable of, talking or hearing or understanding about great memories, about what you've loved about them all along or how they helped you, or reassure them that you're going to help take care of whoever they may be concerned about. One of the people I remember, she loved certain music. And when I went to visit her when she was on hospice, it was quiet in the room and everything. And I suggested to the family, she's always told me that she loves this certain music or whatever. And I would encourage you play that. And I asked her, I said, would you like to hear, whatever the music was? And her eyes just lit up. And so they played that music. So I think trying to put yourself in that person's situation, because most of the time when someone's on hospice or in stage, they're being given medicine to help them with the anxiety. And so if you can focus on memories, showing pictures, talking about what you've always loved about them, listening to their favorite music, turning on their favorite television, anything like that to make what they have for the rest of their life as, it sounds crazy to say, but enjoyable, as comfortable as possible. That's just my personal opinion. And like I say, a therapist may say something else, but that's what I've experienced.
Great advice. I think it's great advice for anyone to keep those positive memories alive.
Mhm.
So good. tell me a little bit about how you work with people and how someone could work with you if they need you.
Well, after over 30 years of medical practice, clinical practice, I transitioned to speaking full time. So the keynote speaking and promoting my book is what I do now. You know, I have taken care of thousands of patients, and I love that one on one. But I have felt that I was being called to help a larger
Mm.
group of people, and this allows me to fulfill my mission just in a different way. But people can reach out to me through my website. It's drrobinhall.com. That's drrobinhall.com. And on there, it gives information about the book and how to contact me if someone is looking for a keynote speaker or a workshop leader, that type of thing.
Beautiful. Amazing. Well, I 100% am behind your mission because it's one of those things people don't know they need it until they need it. But I think the more we can tell people that you never know when you're going to need these kinds of resources. You never know when you're going to need this kind of knowledge, understanding. I've tried to advocate in my own way, but you do it so beautifully.
Well, thank you.
And
You
I
know,
am so
people are a lot stronger than they give themselves credit
yeah.
for. You know, a lot of people say, I don't know how you did all of this. And my husband would say, well, we didn't really have a choice. But people will see the resilience that they never knew they had
Yeah.
just walking through these journeys. And so that's what I really am passionate about right now. And my mission is to help people thrive in their health and in their life and help them know that they can overcome any adversity that comes their way. It's about mindset and setting intention and surrendering, Kathy, surrendering.
Wondering. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of those messages lately just of surrender. So thank you, Dr. Hall. You are amazing. And I am so, so happy to have connected with you. And thank you for humoring me on all of my stories as well.
Well,
Hopefully that's interesting to the audience. I think it will be.
I'm sure it
Um,
will. I'm sure there were other people going down the same path that you are, and I think they're important discussions to make. And I thank you for your vulnerability because being honest and open and transparent is very useful because so many people just see social media when everything looks like it's going great when it really may not be. So I applaud you for doing that. It's very useful.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here. And
For having me.
thanks for everybody who's been listening or watching.